Sit back and enjoy an hour of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get started.
The Apollo 12 astronaut Alan Bean accidentally destroyed the television camera they carried when he pointed it directly at the sun. He left rolls of photographic film on the moon by mistake, and when they returned to Earth during the splashdown, a 16mm film camera that was not secured hit him on the head. All of this was mentioned by him in a documentary in 1996. Most pearlescent effect makeup contains fish scales among its ingredients, specifically from herrings, which contain the substance that naturally produces that distinctive color. This substance is called guanine and reflects light, creating the iridescent shine. Today, there are also synthetic versions used in cosmetics to avoid the use of animal-derived ingredients. There is a library in the airport of Estonia where you can take any book you want to read during your trip. You only have to write on the bookmark which country you took it to. It also works on an honesty system. They do not charge anything, and you are not required to return the books. According to a study that was conducted on European athletes at the Olympic Games, it was discovered that 16.5% of the participants have asthma. This percentage is almost double that of the general population. It is believed that this is because doctors recommend that children with asthma practice some kind of sport so their lungs become stronger. Tiago Reck, a solitary fan of the Brazilian team Santa Cruz do Sul, went viral in 2012 when he was photographed as the only fan in the visiting stands during a match. 8 years later, the same photograph was taken again, except that he had now become the president of the team and had led the club to win its first trophy in more than 100 years since it was founded. The first Japanese person who traveled to Mexico was Hasekura Tsunenaga, who arrived in Acapulco in 1614 with the purpose of establishing a commercial relationship with what was known at that time as New Spain. There are several monuments in his honor in Mexico. In Italy, there is a wine fountain. It is located on a route followed by travelers near Rome and operates 24 hours a day, and anyone can arrive and drink wine for free. However, there is a rule that prohibits entry to people who drink too much and disturb the order. North Korea has an airline called Air Koryo. They have 6 aircraft in operation, and for years it was the worst-rated airline by the organization Skytrax, with 1 star out of 5, although currently its status appears as not rated. Most of its flights are domestic routes or to nearby cities in China and Russia, and a large part of its fleet is composed of old Soviet aircraft such as Tupolev and Ilyushin models. Fights in ice hockey, specifically in the National Hockey League, are not explicitly prohibited. When they occur, referees almost never intervene, and the most severe penalty a participant can receive is having to sit in the penalty box for 5 minutes. This type of punishment is known as a major penalty, and after serving it, players can return to the ice to continue the game. The first Rocky movie, which eventually generated a multi-billion-dollar franchise, was produced with a very tight budget of a little more than $1 million in 1976. The protagonist, Sylvester Stallone, even had to sell his dog because he was struggling financially before the movie was sold. Fortunately, he was able to buy it back after the success of the film. The mother of Buzz Aldrin, one of the first men to reach the moon in the Apollo mission, had the last name Moon. The name of the character Buzz Lightyear is inspired by the name of this astronaut. Aldrin walked on the moon during the Apollo 11 mission in 1969 alongside Neil Armstrong. It is possible for a person who is bilingual or multilingual to be dyslexic in one language and not in another. Dyslexia is a learning disorder that makes reading and writing difficult due to problems relating words and letters. This can occur because each language has different rules between sounds and letters, so some writing systems are easier for the brain to process than others. In the series Silicon Valley, when Guilfoyle hacks a refrigerator, the code that appears on the screen contains in one of the lines the YouTube URL of the video of Rick Astley Never Gonna Give You Up. Sending someone to this video when they click on a link as a joke is called a Rickroll, and it is a long-standing internet tradition. The Python programming language is named after the popular British sketch show Monty Python. The creator of this language wanted to give it a unique, mysterious, and short name, and that is what he came up with. Its creator, Guido van Rossum, was a fan of the program and was looking for a friendly and easy-to-remember name when he began developing it in the late 1980s. In 1925, a man named Arthur Alves convinced a mint in England to make 200,000 banknotes of the currency of Portugal at that time, escudos. To this day, it is considered one of the largest frauds ever carried out, since the amount of money was equivalent to almost 1% of the gross domestic product of Portugal. In 2018, in cities of Russia, Ukraine, Bulgaria, and Romania, orange snow appeared. Winter sports resorts displayed this unusual color, which was caused by sandstorms coming from Kazakhstan or from the Sahara Desert that accumulated in the sky and later fell together with the water in that area. A fan of the Turkish second division soccer team Denizlispor, who had been banned from entering the stadium for unspecified reasons, rented a crane so he could watch the game from outside the stadium, since it was an important match he did not want to miss. The event occurred in the year 2018 and quickly went viral on social media because of how ingenious his solution was. Turkey broke 14 world records for typing speed between 1957 and 1995. This happened because they designed a keyboard where the most commonly used letters in the Turkish language are positioned according to the anatomy of the hands. Actress Winona Ryder mentioned in an interview that after playing the character Lydia in the movie Beetlejuice, she suffered bullying at her school. They even beat her and called her a witch. She said that sometime later, one of the women who had bothered her asked her for an autograph in a cafe, and she refused. Ryder will play Lydia again in the new Beetlejuice movie. A student in Germany found a 17th century painting inside a sofa that he bought at a second-hand store for the equivalent of $200. This painting, called Escape to Egypt, about 400 years old, was later sold for $27,630. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, more than 156,000 soldiers landed on the beaches of Normandy, France. This massive military operation transformed the coastline in that area so much that even today metallic particles are still found in the sand and even buried objects. The ancestors of whales from 50 million years ago were land animals and looked somewhat like a mix between dogs and possums, but over the years and generations, they adapted to marine conditions. Fossils such as Pakicetus and Ambulocetus show intermediate stages of this evolution, with functional legs for walking and progressive adaptations for swimming. In 2013, the United States launched a reconnaissance rocket whose mission logo was an octopus over the planet Earth with the text, "Nothing is beyond our reach." These types of mission patches are usually designed by the military or intelligence units themselves, and sometimes include symbols or internal jokes related to the operation. Alcohol bottles in cartoons were drawn with 3X on the label. This used to be used in real life as a symbol of the quality of the drink in the bottle. During the Prohibition era in the United States, each X indicated the number of times it had been distilled. But centuries earlier, it had been used in beers as a standardized grading system in England. In less than 1 second, the human nose modifies the humidity level of the air we inhale in its passages to a relative humidity of 75% and regulates the temperature to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of whether the air is very cold or very hot. The word cat in most of the most widely spoken languages in the world, such as cat, chat, katze, comes from the Latin felis catus, which means domestic cat. But, for example, in Japanese it is said neko. In this case, there are theories, but it is not actually known exactly how this word originated. Jim Henson, before creating the Muppets, made a series of commercials for the coffee brand Wilkins, in which a character similar to Kermit the Frog behaved violently toward another puppet because it did not drink that coffee. The campaign was a success, which allowed Henson to launch the Muppets show. The sounds made by former tennis player Maria Sharapova during matches were studied, and it was discovered that they reached levels of 101 decibels, which in comparison is louder than a motorcycle, a lawnmower, and even a small airplane. The reason tennis players make these sounds when hitting the ball is to generate more power, to distract, and even to release tension. There is a region in space located above South America and the South Atlantic where the Earth's magnetic field is weaker, allowing radiation to come closer to the planet. In this area, satellites and the International Space Station experience interference and electronic failures. For example, the Hubble Space Telescope cannot send data when it passes through this region, and it does so 10 times a day. Plants appeared before seeds. According to fossils, the first plants that were similar to modern moss reproduced through single-celled spores. Seeds would appear 150 million years later. These appeared in the first trees and advanced vascular plants, which allowed better protection of the embryo and easier dispersal in different environments. In Belgium, voting is mandatory and citizens are automatically registered. For that reason, more than 90% of the eligible population participates in elections, since failing to do so can result in a fine. This rule has existed since the end of the 19th century and seeks to guarantee broad participation in national and local elections. Morocco was the first country to recognize the independence of the United States, and the Sultan of Morocco even informed all the Moroccan pirates that existed at that time not to attack American ships traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. This recognition occurred in the year 1777, and later both countries signed a treaty of friendship that remains one of the oldest still in force for the United States. The largest city that cannot be accessed by road is Iquitos in Peru. It is located in the middle of the Amazon and can only be reached by air or by river. Despite its isolation, it is not disconnected from the modern world, since it has an international airport and commercial ports, and the preferred means of transportation for people there are motorcycles and motorized rickshaws. Indicator birds have a behavior that has not been observed in any other animal. They often guide humans and other large mammals to beehives. Once the mammal takes the honey, this bird feeds on the remaining wax and the larva. In some regions of Africa, they even respond to special calls used by honey gatherers to start this cooperation. When Halley's Comet was going to pass near the planet Earth in 1910, rumors spread among the public that it would bring a toxic gas that would cover the entire planet. Because of this, people began selling gas masks and anti-comet pills that were completely useless. Marlon Brando did not memorize most of his lines for his role in the movie The Godfather, so they resorted to writing them down and placing them in different places on the set so he could read them while filming. They even placed them on other actors. This technique allowed him to maintain a more natural and spontaneous acting style during the scenes. The name of the country Venezuela comes from the name of the city of Venice, Italy. When Spanish explorers arrived in the region in 1499, they saw the stilt houses on Lake Maracaibo. These homes over the water reminded them of Venice, so they called the place Little Venice, which eventually evolved into Venezuela. In 1992, a group of young people who wanted to do community service entered the Bruniquel cave in France to erase graffiti and accidentally erased invaluable cave paintings from 15,000 years ago that represented bison, and which it was recently discovered may have been painted by Neanderthals. Most wines do not actually improve with time. This only happens with the most expensive ones made in a traditional way. Cheap wines are best at the moment you buy them, and they lose quality as time passes, so it is not recommended to store them. Many of the costumes and uniforms worn by characters in the Marvel Comics universe are made with unstable molecules. A technology developed by Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four allows the fabric to withstand the harmful effects of the user's powers and the wear and tear of battles. For 300 years in Europe, people tried to cultivate vanilla so they would not have to import it from Asia and Africa, but they did not succeed until 1836, when they realized that specific insects were needed, such as a species of bee that only lives in regions where vanilla grows naturally, making it practically impossible. Plants on one side and the other side of the Great Wall of China have been studied, and it was concluded that they began to develop different genetic variations starting from the time when it was built, to the point that they could begin evolving into different species. The bucardo, a species of wild goat, is considered the only animal that has gone extinct twice, in the year 2000 and again in 2003, when a cloning experiment produced an individual that survived only a short time. It is also considered so far the only animal that has been de-extinct. The high school teacher from San Diego, California, John Corcoran, kept his inability to read a secret for 17 years, until he finally confessed and decided to learn at 48 years of age. After this, he wrote books and created a foundation to promote reading. King Harold V of Norway swore that he would not marry anyone else if he was not allowed to marry Sonja Haraldsson, the daughter of a textile merchant. For nearly a decade, he fought against royal opposition to marry her, even threatening to abdicate. Finally, in 1968, he received permission from his father, King Olav V, and they married, and Sonja became the Queen of Norway. Every time you breathe, you inhale around 50 bacteria that are potentially dangerous to health. But generally, all of them are destroyed by the immune system before they cause any harm. The respiratory system has mucus and small cilia that trap and expel many microorganisms before they reach the lungs. The skin of octopuses contains the same light-sensitive proteins that they have in their eyes, So, in a way, they can see with their skin or respond to changes in lighting without needing information from their eyes. This helps them quickly change color and texture to camouflage themselves with their surroundings and avoid predators. Platypuses and echidnas do not have a stomach or an equivalent organ. Their beak connects directly to their intestines without passing through an area where digestive acids and enzymes are secreted. Scientists believe that this organ was lost during their evolution, and that they compensate for this absence by crushing their food with small stones or hard particles inside the mouth before swallowing it. Oppositional defiant disorder is a behavioral disorder characterized by patterns of disobedience, hostility, and defiant behavior toward authority figures. It tends to affect boys more than girls, and it is said that the tendency to question established rules can also become a strength if it is properly channeled. Euro banknotes of different denominations contain drawings of fictional European architecture that were carefully designed so they would not resemble any real construction, but would still have traditional European characteristics. Shortly afterward, in the Netherlands, they built bridges identical to those on the banknotes, even in the same colors. The most famous phrase in Spider-Man, "With great power comes great responsibility," was actually mentioned in the first live-action version of Superman in 1948 by the father of Clark Kent. This was 14 years before Uncle Ben said it in the first Spider-Man comic. The slow loris is the only venomous primate. The origin of this venom is a toxin produced by a gland on its arm that they mix with their saliva before biting in order to defend themselves. They can also apply it to the fur of their young to protect them. Their bite can cause intense pain and severe allergic reactions in humans, and this animal moves slowly in order to go unnoticed among the branches during the night. In the 1993 satirical comedy Cannibal the Musical, all the Native Americans who appear are actually Japanese, and they say phrases in Japanese that mean things such as, "What the hell are you saying?" or "This movie is very stupid." This was added as a mockery of early westerns that did not represent cultures accurately. Near the city of Tokyo, in Japan, there is an underground water discharge channel. It is a giant space through which water can flow in order to prevent floods. For most of the year, it is a tourist attraction and a filming location. It is part of a flood control system with enormous concrete columns that divert water from nearby rivers during intense storms. At the end of the Middle Ages, books were so valuable that they were chained to shelves in libraries so people could not take them away. Since the printing press had not yet been invented, they had to be made by hand. Copying them could take months or even years, since scribes reproduced each page by hand on parchment in monasteries or scriptoria. The most downloaded mobile phone game of all time so far is Candy Crush Saga, with more than 500 million players. Call of Duty Mobile and Among Us follow in popularity in second and third place respectively. The game was released in the year 2012 by the company King, and became especially popular for its system of short levels and rewards that encourage playing several times a day. When experts need to handle valuable and delicate works of art and antiques, they do not use white cloth gloves, as has often been seen in movies and popular culture. They simply wash their hands beforehand, or may wear latex gloves. In fact, a white cotton glove has a greater chance of damaging the piece and leaving microparticles. The Westcar Papyrus, a document from ancient Egypt, contains the first known account of magic. In it, King Khufu asks a magician named Dedi to restore life to the heads of a goose, a duck, and an ox, and he manages to do it. Technically, it would be the first magic trick in history. When giraffes are born, they have to survive a fall of more than 5 feet because their mother cannot bend down to give birth. In addition, they have to start walking immediately. Within a few minutes, they try to stand up, and generally, in less than 1 hour, they are already able to follow their mother to avoid predators in the savannah. In Australia, instead of having chocolate Easter rabbits, they created the Easter bilby as an alternative, representing an endangered species of marsupial called Macrotus, native to the country, which is also known as bilbies. The idea arose to promote its conservation, since introduced rabbits have caused significant ecological damage in Australian ecosystems. Michael Jackson appeared as a playable character in the video game Ready to Rumble Boxing Round 2 for Sega Dreamcast in 1999. They even captured his voice and dance moves to include them in the game as part of his fighting style. He also appeared in the dance game Space Channel 5 the same year. Between 30 and 39% of people in Vietnam have the last name Nguyen, which is the most common surname in the country. It comes from a dynasty. There are countries that face the problem of the extinction of surnames, favoring only the most popular ones. The Pentagon developed a nano-flying vehicle in 2011, a spy drone shaped like a hummingbird. $4 million were invested in its development. It was recognized by Time magazine as one of the 50 best inventions of that year. The creators of the detective comedy series Sledgehammer found out that it was not going to be renewed for the next season, resulting in a cancellation. Knowing this, in the final episode, the protagonist fails while trying to deactivate a nuclear bomb and destroys the entire city of San Francisco. Since that episode had very good ratings, they decided to renew the series. Then, the following season had to be made as a prequel with events that had happened 5 years earlier. The Lobster War was a diplomatic dispute between Brazil and France that arose from a debate about lobster fishing. Brazil argued that lobsters crawled along the continental shelf, while France claimed that lobsters swim like other fish. This decision determined fishing rights along the Brazilian coast. In 1963, both nations even considered a military conflict, but ultimately reached an agreement to divide the profits. Director Guillermo del Toro lost his notebook in a taxi in London, where he had written down all the ideas for the movie Pan's Labyrinth. Because they had been talking about comic books, and he had mentioned the hotel where he was staying to the driver, the notebook was returned to him 2 days later. Del Toro gave him a tip of $900 as a thank you. Gelatophobia is a pathological fear of laughter or ridicule. It occurs mainly in people who have suffered bullying, who develop an uncontrollable fear of other people's laughter, interpreting it as a personal attack. It is believed that up to 13% of people suffer from this. Clarence Nash performed the voice of Donald Duck for more than 50 years, taking part in 120 short films and movies. Characterized by the sounds produced by air trapped in the mouth rather than the vocal cords, in order to keep the character consistent, in addition to English, he also performed the voice in other languages, most notably Spanish, which he even knew how to speak, while for the other languages he used the phonetic alphabet. As part of an advertising campaign, the label of the Heinz bottle was redesigned with a border the same color as the ketchup inside, so that it would be possible to detect if the bottle had been refilled with a cheaper brand of ketchup, a practice that is common in many restaurants around the world. Among the fictional languages that you can actually learn are the Elvish language from The Lord of the Rings, Klingon from Star Trek, Na'vi from Avatar, and Dothraki from the books by George R.R. Martin. Others, such as the languages from Star Wars or the Minions, are not considered complete, so you cannot learn them. The house that was used in the series Malcolm in the Middle was a private residence that they rented for $3,000 a day when they were filming. In 2011, it was rebuilt, so it no longer looks the same. However, the house next door remains, so fans of the series often visit it. The first time a computer-generated sequence was used in a movie was in Vertigo from 1958. For the introduction, a World War II computer was used that had been designed to aim at moving targets in the air, which made it possible to generate animated curves based on mathematical equations. Actress Kristen Stewart collaborated on a scientific publication about artificial intelligence in 2017. The study was based on style transfer techniques used in her short film, Come Swim, since she wanted part of the movie to look like her paintings. Pontiac made a translucent car called the Deluxe 6 Plexiglass that was presented as a prototype at the 1939 World's Fair. Its exterior is made of acrylic, and it was not intended to be sold. It was only so people could see what cars looked like inside. The model that was built has been preserved to this day. Even though it is transparent, it has not been lost. One of the pyramids of Egypt was vandalized 2,000 years ago by a Roman tourist who wrote, "I did not like anything except the sarcophagus, and I cannot read the hieroglyphs." This type of graffiti was relatively common in antiquity, and many Greek and Roman visitors left inscriptions on Egyptian monuments during their travels. The colored squares or circles that appear on product packaging are the different tones that were used in the printing process, and they help quality inspectors, through a scanner, to more easily see if a batch has a problem with any color. This way, they can more easily identify the machine or the ink that needs to be repaired. There has always been a belief that garlic can repel vampires, according to legends, but the real reason is not known. One theory says that, since vampirism was thought to be a disease, it could be cured with the antibiotic properties of garlic, while others think that, since garlic repels mosquitoes, it might also repel vampires because they feed on blood. Seeds that were 2,000 years old were successfully germinated after being found at an archaeological site in Israel. The result was a species of date palm that had been extinct. The seeds were discovered at the fortress of Masada, and after germinating, the plant was nicknamed Methuselah. It belongs to the ancient variety known as the Judean date palm. Newspapers are traditionally very large because of a tax that was established in Great Britain in 1712, where the amount they had to pay the government increased the more pages the publication had. So they increased the size of the pages so there would be fewer of them. And shortly afterward, newspapers in other countries copied this format. In 1951, Mexico City suffered one of its worst floods, caused by the overflowing of the rivers that, at that time, ran through the area. This problem lasted 3 months, during which many people even had to use rafts to move around. On a corner in the historic center of the city, there is a lion's head that is said to mark the height that the water reached at that time. The blue whale has the slowest pulse of all mammals. Its heartbeats have been recorded at a rate of 1 every 2 minutes while at rest. During deep dives, its heart rate decreases to conserve oxygen, while near the surface, it can increase considerably to pump blood through its enormous body. Leafcutter ants do not eat leaves. They actually cut the pieces in order to cultivate fungi, which later serve as their food. They are among the animals that have the most complex social structures in the world. In their colonies, there are different specialized worker castes responsible for cutting, transporting, cleaning, and caring for the fungus gardens. The National Institutes of Health in the United States spent $1.5 million developing a mobile device video game where you are a mother who has to persuade her child to eat more vegetables. It did not achieve the expected success. Practically nobody played it. If you play the sound of running water in nature through speakers near some beavers, they will begin to cover them with branches and leaves until nothing can be heard. This proves that the instinct beavers have to build dams is triggered by the sound made by flowing water. On September 11, 2024, the record for the greatest number of people orbiting the Earth was broken with 19. The previous record was 17. This number includes the people on the International Space Station, those orbiting on the Chinese space station, and the Polaris Dawn mission that were aboard Crew Dragon. The first appearance of Charlie Brown and Snoopy in animation was in a 1965 special called A Charlie Brown Christmas. At first, it was rejected by the television network CBS because they did not like that the voices were performed by inexperienced children, and they were not convinced by the anti-consumerist theme. But in the end, it was broadcast. The singer of the band My Chemical Romance, Gerard Way, worked as an intern at the television channel Cartoon Network. During the time he was there, he presented a proposal for a cartoon called The Breakfast Monkey, but it was rejected by the channel's executives. Miners in the Yogo Gold area in Montana, United States, noticed for 16 years that among the minerals they obtained there were small blue rocks, but they ignored them because they were focused only on the gold. Until one day, they decided to send a box of these rocks to be analyzed at a jewelry store, and they were informed that they were high-quality sapphires that did not even need special treatment to enhance their color, which is why they are highly valued. The lava eruption seen in the background during the final battle in the movie Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith was not generated by computer. It is part of footage of an eruption that was occurring at Mount Etna in Italy during the days when this production was being made. During the production of the movie Borat, the FBI opened a file and followed the crew because they had reports from many people who had seen a terrorist in an ice cream truck, who turned out to be the main actor Sacha Baron Cohen. People have been arrested in many countries for sitting on sea turtles and posting it on social media. It is considered a crime in many parts of the world. Sea turtles are protected species, and handling or riding them can cause serious injuries to their shells or stress that affects their survival. Cats can develop an addiction to tuna and refuse to eat anything else. The reason why they like this food so much is because tuna and other fish disproportionately activate the umami taste receptors that humans also have, and it is, together with sweet, salty, sour, and bitter, part of the basic tastes. The starting blocks where competitors place their feet in track and field events include technological advances such as pressure sensors. This is used to detect a false start, and even each athlete has their own speaker. In the past, athletes began running when they heard the sound of a pistol, but it was shown that this could give an advantage to those closer to the sound source by up to 8 thousandths of a second, a time that can be crucial in events such as the 100-meter dash. Each year, the government of China offers 60 students scholarships to study at universities in North Korea. During their studies, Chinese students have more freedom in the country than other visitors. They can travel from city to city without a guide, and they can take the subway whenever they want. Kylie Jenner gave her 2-year-old daughter a pony worth $200,000 that came from the Netherlands. The shipping cost $10,000, and they named it Frozen, since it is her daughter's favorite movie. Jenner is the 5th most followed person on Instagram. In 2017, a note written by Albert Einstein was auctioned for $1.5 million. Written in 1922 as a tip to a messenger in Tokyo because he did not have cash with him, the note says, "A calm and modest life brings more joy than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness." The oldest obsidian bracelet in the world is 9,500 years old. It was discovered in Turkey, and analysis revealed the great craftsmanship of its maker, since the quality of its surface, symmetry, and curves can be comparable to the precision used in the production of modern telescope lenses. The discovery of this object made experts reconsider the technological capabilities of Neolithic societies, which were not as primitive as we often think. The main ingredients of Play-Doh modeling dough are flour, water, and oil, so it can be eaten. When it was created in the decade of 1930, it was going to be used as a wallpaper cleaner, but the manufacturers realized that children liked it, so it was redesigned as a toy. Until a few centuries ago, there was a land bridge that allowed passage between India and the island of Sri Lanka. It is called Adam's Bridge, and today it is a chain of reefs and sandbanks that can be seen from the air and in satellite images. It stretches between the island of Rameshwaram and the island of Mannar, and for a long time, it was shallow enough to cross on foot in some sections. Many countries send their fish production on transport ships to China so that it can be cut into fillets and processed, and then send it back. This only makes sense from an economic perspective, since it ends up being cheaper for them than doing it in their own territory. The Abraham Lincoln animatronic was one of the first human figure animatronics created by Disney. It was built in 1963 and displayed at Disneyland in an attraction. According to anecdotes from people, his hat often fell off and something happened that they called robotic madness, where he began hitting his chair, and they also say that once it broke and red hydraulic fluid began to leak out. After a few years, it was replaced by a newer model. The planet Venus has such a slow rotation that it takes the equivalent of 243 Earth days to complete one full turn, and a human could even walk faster than that. Meanwhile, to complete one orbit around the Sun, it takes only 225 Earth days. That means a year lasts less than a day on Venus. A Dutch artist named Wim Schippers created an artwork that consists of a floor covered in peanut butter and nothing else. It was first exhibited in 1969 in a gallery. Then it was recreated in 1997, and again in 2010 when a museum in Rotterdam bought the artwork and the concept overall for an approximate price of 100,000 euros. Elephants can suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, just like humans, but it has been observed that they can recover by socializing more with members of the same species, which is known as social buffering. This represents a problem for elephants in captivity that are alone or that only live with one other elephant. Hydrangeas change color depending on the pH of the soil in which they grow, acting as natural indicators of acidity. In acidic soils with a pH below 5, the flowers turn blue, while in alkaline soils with a pH above 6, they turn pink or red. This happens because in acidic conditions, the plant absorbs more aluminum from the soil, which gives it the blue color. The most visited city in the world in 2023 was Istanbul, Turkey, with a little more than 20 million international visitors. It is considered a bridge city between different cultures and continents due to its geographical location. Many camels were taken to Canada in 1862 to help carry loads during the British Columbia Gold Rush, but the experiment was a disaster because the camels frightened the horses and ate the miners' clothes and bars of soap. The owner of the airline Virgin Atlantic, Sir Richard Branson, lost a bet with an executive from the airline Air Asia about the winning team of the Abu Dhabi Formula One Grand Prix in 2010. The loser had to dress as flight service staff on the winner's airline. In the movie The Shining, it is not explicitly mentioned who opened the pantry door when Jack Torrance becomes locked inside. Opinions were divided between the idea that he forced the mechanism himself, or that the spirits of the place did it, or even that there was another secret door. In an interview, The director Stanley Kubrick mentioned that, in his opinion, it was the spirits of the hotel who did it. There are fake buildings in the city of Paris that were made to cover infrastructure necessary for the city, such as ventilation for the metro and tunnels, and to hide electrical and water installations. Some even have paintings of people in the windows. The Silicon Valley entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes once had a fortune of $4,500,000,000, but she lost everything overnight after the fraud carried out by her health technology company Theranos was discovered. She is currently in prison. The championship of the North American Professional Ice Hockey League did not have a winner in 1919. This was due to an influenza epidemic during the finals that left most of the players of one of the competing teams hospitalized. The series was being played between the Montreal Canadiens and the Seattle Metropolitans, and it was canceled before a champion could be determined. In the series Gravity Falls, the number 618 appears repeatedly in almost every episode. This number refers to June 18th, which is the birthday of Alex Hirsch, the creator of the series. The actor The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, has 2 world records. In 2015, he obtained the record for the most selfies taken in 3 minutes, which were 105, when he was on the red carpet at the premiere of the movie San Andreas, although that record was later surpassed. The other record is more interesting. He is the actor who has been paid the most for his first starring role when he made The Scorpion King and received a payment of $5.5 million. Fossils of pygmy tyrannosaurs that lived in the Arctic region of the planet were discovered. They measured around 23 feet in length and 6.5 feet in height, half the size of a normal Tyrannosaurus rex. Their size is due to adaptations they developed because of the climate and environment of the region over the years. For centuries, gorillas were considered mythical creatures that only existed in explorers' accounts and legends. It was not until 1847 that the western gorilla was classified as a new species based on bones collected in Liberia, and later, more species were observed in the wild. In the movie RoboCop from 1987, at the end of the credits, in the copyright notice screen that appears at the very end of the film, there is a somewhat threatening Easter egg message. It says that anyone who distributes or exhibits the movie without permission will be pursued by enforcement droids. Cricket fighting is a hobby and a betting activity that was very popular in China since the time of the Tang Dynasty, about 1,000 years ago. The first cricket that stops fighting or leaves the battlefield loses. It is still practiced today as a tradition, and some enthusiasts breed and train crickets specifically for these competitions. A 70-year-old person has lost, on average, 103 pounds of skin cells throughout their life. These skin particles naturally shed from the body day by day, which helps protect the skin from diseases. A large part of the dust that accumulates in homes and rooms is partly made up of these tiny shed cells. Your nose requires more blood flow to maintain its normal temperature in the cold. This causes the blood vessels in this region to dilate and produce more mucus, which is why more liquid comes out of your nose when it is cold. In addition, cold air tends to be drier, so the body generates more moisture in the nasal passages to humidify and warm the air before it reaches the lungs. The band Oasis became so famous, and the problems between its 2 main members, the Gallagher brothers, became so notorious that in 1995, a record label released a single that consisted of an interview in which the brothers argue for more than 10 consecutive minutes. This recording reached number 52 on the popularity charts in the United Kingdom. In 1934, a $100,000 gold certificate bill was printed, but it was never issued to the general public. Used exclusively for transactions between Federal Reserve banks, facilitating internal transfers of money, it is the highest denomination of dollar bill ever made. A Steinway piano, belonging to the Polish pianist Christian Zimmerman, was destroyed by authorities in the United States when he went there for a tour, because the glue had a strange smell and they thought it might contain a bomb. He had problems again a few years later on another tour he did. Since then, he no longer performs concerts in that country. There is a bird that has the same colors as Pikachu. It is the yellow woodpecker, or cream-colored woodpecker. It lives in South America. Its plumage is yellow and it has red color near the mouth, similar to the circles on the cheeks of the well-known Pokemon character. This species lives mainly in forests and open savannas, where it feeds on ants, termites, and larvae that it finds under the bark of trees, using its strong beak to pierce it. The Amazon River did not always flow toward the Atlantic Ocean. Millions of years ago, this river flowed in the opposite direction, emptying into the Pacific. The uplift of the Andes mountain range caused a dramatic change in its course. Over time, the Amazon reversed its direction. This geological phenomenon had a major impact on the formation of the landscape and ecosystems of South America. Dogs often tilt their heads when they want to recognize a word that they associate with an activity, such as going for a walk. If a dog does not tilt its head often, it means it does not focus as much on sound and responds more to visual stimuli. It is believed that laughter causes a certain degree of synchronization between the brains of people who are speaking and those who are listening, which makes their emotions more connected. Studies with brain scanners suggest that hearing laughter activates areas related to empathy and social communication. In Portugal, there are two 18th century libraries that have bats inside them. They keep them because they help preserve the books by getting rid of insects that could eat the paper. However, keeping them requires daily cleaning by the staff of the place. The palmaris longus muscle is an example of human evolution in progress. This small forearm muscle is absent in approximately 14% of the world's population without significantly affecting the function of the hand. It is considered an evolutionary vestige that comes from ancestral species that spent a lot of time hanging from trees. There is a Justice League comic from 1999 in which a hero eliminates the dictator of a country similar to Iraq, which causes the country to become destabilized and makes the quality of life of the residents worse than it had been before. This is very similar to what happened in Iraq in real life in the following decade. All of the concrete used to build the Hoover Dam, a total of 4.3 million cubic yards, would have been enough to build a two-lane highway from Los Angeles to New York. It was completed in 1936. The cereal teff, considered a superfood, had its export banned for a time in Ethiopia in order to prevent food shortages throughout the country, as happened in Bolivia when quinoa exploded in popularity due to its status as a very nutritious food. 95% of humans sneeze 4 times a day on average. However, this number can increase due to allergies or depending on the time of year. The reason we sneeze more than once in a row is because the body activates a defense mechanism that generates additional sneezes to completely remove irritation from the nasal cavities. In the trash compactor scene in Star Wars, Mark Hamill, playing Luke Skywalker, wanted the serial number needed to escape to be his own phone number, but that line had to be spoken by Han Solo. So he forced Harrison Ford to say his number so that it would remain in the movie. Chiweenie dogs are the mix between a dachshund and a chihuahua that has recently increased in popularity. They are good for living with people, but they can be very noisy and bark too much. They often inherit the elongated body of the dachshund and the alert temperament of the chihuahua, which makes them small but very energetic dogs that protect their home. The Traub motorcycle, built in 1916, was discovered hidden behind a wall in Chicago and is considered one of the rarest motorcycles in the world. It was built by hand with very advanced features for its time, and none of its parts matched the other motorcycles that existed during those years. The action of swiping to a new video on TikTok burns so few calories that you would need to swipe around 360 times to burn a single calorie. This means that to burn the equivalent of a small apple with about 50 calories, you would need to swipe 18,000 times. Although this only counts the movement of the thumb and is only an approximation, since many other factors can influence it. In ancient Egypt, couples were considered married when they moved in together. Wedding ceremonies were reserved for the upper class. For most of the population, it was enough to establish a shared household and share property. And in many cases, written agreements were signed to define inheritances and family responsibilities. The O that appears at the beginning of many surnames of Irish origin, such as O'Brien or O'Reilly, means descendant of. It comes from ancient Gaelic and was originally written O, indicating belonging to a family lineage or clan that descended from a specific ancestor. In 1945, a German submarine became unusable and had to be abandoned because of the high-pressure toilet inside it that was not operated correctly by the crew member who used it. The water leak and the release of gases forced it to rise to the surface, where it was captured by Allied aircraft. In Africa, there are more people who have access to cellular phone services than people with access to clean drinking water and electricity. This is partly because mobile networks require less infrastructure than electrical or water networks, so they have expanded more quickly in rural areas. If astronauts fall asleep in a non-specialized bed for many hours in zero gravity, they run the risk of waking up with their head surrounded by a bubble of their own carbon dioxide, which will prevent them from breathing and can make them feel like they are suffocating. The design of Coca-Cola glass bottles was created in 1914 after all bottles of similar drinks were using the same shape. So, they set out to create a bottle that would be so distinct and recognizable that it could be identified just by touch or even when broken on the ground. The term public relations was invented by Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, to replace the use of the word propaganda, since it had a negative connotation due to the use the Germans gave it during World War I. The Turk was an automatic chess-playing machine built in 1760. It was demonstrated against notable figures such as Benjamin Franklin and Napoleon, whom it defeated. Although its popularity lasted around 50 years, it was later discovered to be a hoax because it had a person hidden inside who made the moves. It was not a real robot. To film the movie Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, they had to change child labor laws in the United Kingdom at the end of the year 2000. They added working hours per week and made schedules more flexible to allow classes on the sets. This was done because a large part of the cast was composed of children and teenagers who had to continue their education during the long filming days. The physicist and theologian Isaac Newton was a member of the British Parliament for 1 year, where he spoke only once, and it was to ask someone to please close a window. He represented the University of Cambridge at the end of the 17th century, and according to historical accounts, his participation in debates was practically non-existent during that period. Hatsune Miku was not the first virtual singer. In 1997, Kyoko Date was launched in Japan as a computer-generated virtual idol who was treated as a real artist by her talent agency. However, she did not have much success. Unlike Hatsune Miku and other Vocaloids, Kyoko's voice was actually recorded by a real person. The first experts in computer animation had to possess knowledge in many different areas, since in addition to knowing about animation, they also had to develop new algorithms and techniques in order to create even the simplest animations, because the tools that are used today did not yet exist. A castle was built in France using only methods that existed in the Middle Ages, in the 13th century. The project began in 1997 and was finished in 2024. Even the clothing of the people who contributed to the construction was from the medieval period, and the materials were obtained locally. It is believed that hiccups are an ancestral trait or evolutionary remnant of the amphibian breathing used by the first animals that lived on land and had both lungs and gills. Some scientists compare this reflex with the mechanism that tadpoles use to move water over their gills before developing lungs. In the city of Manitowoc, Wisconsin, United States, the Sputnik Festival is held every year to commemorate the day when a piece of the Soviet satellite, Sputnik, fell on 8th Street in this city on September 5, 1962. Among the celebrations are an alien fashion show and the launching of flying saucers. According to research, sweating when we are anxious or nervous is an indicator to other people that they should stay alert for any danger. It is an evolutionary physical characteristic, and also, when people are close enough, the smell activates the region of the brain that processes emotions and social signals. In 2018, a security guard at a museum in France was tired, so he sat in a chair he found nearby and broke it. Shortly afterward, he realized that it was a 200-year-old chair that had belonged to Napoleon. It had to be restored, and the guard was not fired. He only had to attend a disciplinary hearing. In 1915, a rumor was published in the newspaper The New York Times, claiming that Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison were going to win the Nobel Prize together. But this did not happen because they were not willing to share it. They did not get along at all. In the African country of Sierra Leone, people who want to obtain a driver's license have to pass a board game in which they answer questions about driving rules. This is done before taking a test with a real car. The board simulates traffic situations, and each square presents questions or decisions related to road signs, road safety, and behavior on the road. There are many roads in the world where a phenomenon occurs in which cars in neutral appear to move uphill on a road that actually slopes downward. It is known as a magnetic hill or gravity hill, but in reality, it is only an optical illusion where reference points confuse people's perspective. Goats are immune to different poisonous plants, such as poison ivy, which makes them a good alternative to use instead of herbicides to clear land. They are often rented by the hour for this purpose. In addition, they can feed on more than 100 different types of plants, including brambles and dense weeds, which is why they are also used to reduce the risk of wildfires by removing dry vegetation in areas that are difficult to reach with machinery. Geladas, which are the only primates that feed on grass, are also among the few herbivorous animals that have binocular vision. meaning their eyes face forward, a characteristic more typical of predators. Most herbivores have monocular peripheral vision. Their eyes are located on the sides of the skull. Uranus and Neptune belong to a category of planets called ice giants because less than 20% of their mass consists of hydrogen and helium, while gas giants such as Jupiter and Saturn are 90% hydrogen and helium. The movie Shrek was originally a children's storybook. It was written in 1990, and the story is similar: an ogre who ends up marrying a princess. However, it also has some quite different elements, such as Donkey barely appearing, and in addition, Shrek could breathe fire from his mouth and had laser vision, something that would not have been bad to include in the movie. In 1870, in Belgium, they tried to create a letter delivery service using cats to replace carrier pigeons. But in the test they conducted, which consisted of reaching their home from the other side of the city, one cat took 4 hours, while others took up to 24 hours, so the plan was discarded. The bellbird is the loudest bird in the world. It lives in South America and, despite being small, its call can reach up to 125 decibels, which is close to the threshold of pain for the human ear. It is also a very peculiar sound. It sounds very artificial, similar to an alarm. Producing an aluminum can from recycled materials uses up to 95% less energy than making it from scratch. This happens because the materials have already been refined previously, so to manufacture them a second time, fewer cleaning processes are needed, and therefore less energy. BMW built a prototype car that could change shape. Its movable structure was controlled by motors that stretched a spandex fabric covering that could be controlled by the driver or automatically depending on conditions such as speed. But it remained only a prototype. During the production of champagne, the bottles have to be turned every day so that sediments do not accumulate. While in some factories this is done with machines, in traditional producers, there are people who must turn up to 40,000 bottles every day. In ancient cultures such as the Celts, it was believed that benevolent and gentle spirits lived in trees. For that reason, it became customary to touch trees when you needed protection or good luck. That is where the saying and the custom of knocking on wood when you do not want something bad to happen comes from. On the site where the Louvre Museum in Paris now stands, there was previously a medieval castle that was demolished in stages and replaced by the palace. To this day, remains of the base and the walls that surrounded it can be seen in different places in Paris, including one that is in a parking lot. In a classic cognitive dissonance experiment, participants were paid $1 or $20 for doing the same one-hour task that was especially boring. When it ended, those who had received $1 said it had been stimulating, while those who received 20 said they had hated it. The airline British Airways was in negotiations to have its airplanes appear in the James Bond movie Casino Royale, but they did not reach an agreement, and the airplanes that appeared in the movie were those of Virgin Atlantic. In response to this, when the movie was shown during British Airways flights, the version was altered with the Virgin Atlantic logos removed. Christmas lights can be seen from space in different cities around the world, and it is estimated that light pollution during the holiday season is 50% greater. Satellite images have shown that in some cities, nighttime illumination increases noticeably in December due to decorations, shop displays, and additional festive lighting on streets and homes. A tree of the genus Encephalartos, discovered in Africa at the end of the 19th century, is considered the loneliest organism in the world. This group of plants dominated during the age of the dinosaurs. However, this is the last known specimen of its species. Scientists have unsuccessfully searched for a partner to pollinate it so that it could exist again in the wild, since the trees that exist of this type are clones. Most apartment buildings in New York City were built with 6 floors because the city's water service could provide enough pressure for water to rise only 6 floors. Taller buildings need their own tank and pumping system. In Paris, there is a museum of counterfeiting, where they display the best copies or clones of products, banknotes, coins, works of art, or anything that can be copied. The place shows comparisons between original and counterfeit objects to teach how to detect imitations, and also explains the techniques used by counterfeiters. Actor Heath Ledger kept a journal that he wrote as his character the Joker to prepare for his performance, where he included things the Joker would have found entertaining, such as injured doctors, geniuses with brain damage, landmines, and hats. This way of preparing, by getting into the mind of the character, is called the Stanislavski method. Some children have a genuine fear of mathematics. This was confirmed when brain scans showed activity in the amygdala, the area that activates when something causes fear. It became active when they had to solve a math problem. The Andean condor, when it flies, flaps its wings only 1% of the time. The other 99%, it simply glides, using the air to its advantage to stay aloft. It is one of the heaviest flying birds on the entire planet. Horses became extinct in the American continent about 10,000 years ago, and only returned to America when Christopher Columbus brought some in 1493. This extinction occurred at the end of the last glacial period, a time when many species of megafauna disappeared. William Adams was an English navigator who arrived in Japan in the year 1600, becoming the first Briton to visit that country. Sometime later, he was also considered the first foreign samurai under his new name, Anjin Muda. Martial arts fighters usually keep serious expressions because it has been shown that smiling before a match increases the chances of defeat, since a smile is associated with feelings such as fear and submission. Pickles have existed for more than 4,000 years. The ancient inhabitants of Mesopotamia were the first to place cucumbers in brine to preserve them, and it is believed that they reached Mesopotamia from India, a country that ranks second in global pickle consumption. The first place is China. Before building the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, the plan was to make an underground tunnel to cross the bay while ships passed above. Even though building the tunnel was cheaper, they ultimately decided to build the bridge because it could serve as a distinctive structure for the region, like a monument. An analysis was conducted on the conversations people have in everyday life, and it was discovered that complaints and gossip make up as much as 80% of what people talk about. Some studies on social communication suggest that much of these conversations also serve to strengthen social bonds and share information within groups. There is a video game in development called Metamorphosis VR, in which you play from the perspective of a salesman who has turned into a cockroach and must regain his humanity. The name and the story refer to Franz Kafka's novel Metamorphosis from 1915. Alligator snapping turtles, or snapping turtles, evolved to have a strong bite as a defense against predators because they are too large to hide inside their shells like common turtles. For that reason, they also have more open shells and very powerful jaws that can close very quickly when they feel threatened. Researchers calculated how much money the economy loses every Friday the 13th and concluded that it is between $700 and $800 million. This is due to the superstition that it is a day of bad luck and people avoid traveling and making important expenses. There are cicadas that, during the first stage of their lives, spend up to 17 years about 1 foot underground without seeing the outside world, until they emerge to the surface, climb a tree, and become adults. During that time, they feed on the sap of roots and remain in the nymph stage until millions emerge at the same time in very precise cycles. Nuclear divers are professionals whose job consists of submerging themselves in the cooling systems of nuclear reactors at power plants to perform maintenance work. It is one of the best paid jobs per hour, but it is also one of the most dangerous. Even though dragonflies have 6 legs, they cannot walk. Their limbs are used to hold on to plants and to capture their food, which consists of smaller insects. Their legs form a kind of basket with which they catch prey while flying, which makes them very efficient aerial hunters. The term yak shaving is used to describe when the process of completing a task first requires doing other tasks that appear irrelevant and unnecessary to the main objective. It is used in management, in programming, or with any type of task. Devices used to electrocute mosquitoes can launch insect particles up to 6 feet away, so the air around them can become contaminated with viruses and bacteria that can land on food or be inhaled by people. NFL games usually last around 3 hours if you include the time for commercials and all the pauses they have. But if you add up the total time during which there is action and the ball is moving, it averages only 11 minutes. In the country of Sri Lanka, stilt fishing became popular after World War II, since the lack of food meant that there were too many fishermen creating vibrations in the water and scaring the fish away. Because of this, fishermen began climbing onto bamboo structures that supported them. It was recently discovered that dolphins can also breathe through their mouths. This was discovered after they found a dolphin that had damage to the blowhole, the hole they have on top of their head. They can stay underwater for up to 30 minutes before needing to come up to breathe. The MTV channel began its broadcast at the first minute of August 1st, 1981. The first thing they aired were images of the first launch of the shuttle Columbia, which they used as a bumper until 1986, when it was removed after the accident of the shuttle Challenger. Internet users discovered that the hospital floor that appears in episode 12 of the fourth season of Breaking Bad has a pattern that seems to allude to the series' logo, the two green squares that represent elements from the periodic table. However, the creator of the series, Vince Gilligan, mentioned in the Blu-ray commentary track that this was only a coincidence. That floor had already been there long before. The Huns did not have a writing system, so everything that is known about this nomadic people so far comes from what their enemies wrote. All of them wrote that their appearance was monstrous, as well as their way of speaking and their behaviors. There is a tower with lights in Stockholm, Sweden, where anyone with a smartphone, through an app, can change the colors it displays. Its creators mentioned that it symbolizes the power of democracy and the power of the people.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.